Okay, y'all. I think we are live. Let me just make sure that everything is, connected and moving properly here. Um, Let me check really quickly, check on my stuff. Okay, so it looks like we are live. It looks like we are connected. Um, Let me just check on my end here. All right. Okay, we're live. We're live. We're live. All right, guys, welcome. This is going to be a very interesting conversation, interesting stream today. I don't know how long it'll last. I guess it depends on how, in depth we get in the topic. Now, you guys already know the rules of my streams. Typically, I try not to go more than an hour. But however, if we got a larger audience or folks want to hop on the panels, then it can go longer than that. Just want to lay down the groundwork there. But with all that being said, I believe we are ready to kind of get started. Right now, guys, look, I know I have not been live on this channel for a while now. I've been uploading a lot of. Now, if you guys are watching my channel, I've been uploading a lot of clips, shorter clips, in regards to white people. Some clips saying that, hey, white people are apologizing to black people, they're asking forgiveness. And all of this was really meant to lead to today's live stream in regards to the fact that it seems like the quote unquote white demographic as a whole in America, but globally, they can see the writing on the wall. They can see that their time of reign, their time of dominance is coming to an end. And there is a sense, or I guess a fear of retribution. And I think you can see that in, that video I posted recently on my channel of the white congregation apologizing to black people. And look, something I've noticed is that, white people fear revenge, but they especially fear for black people. And the fundamental reason behind it, in my opinion, is because, black people are the biggest victims of Western imperialism and Western colonization on the global stage. I would say the only people who suffered more under, white Western imperialism and white Western domination really is, the Native Americans, because they were erased. But outside of them, black people essentially are the ones who suffer the most under white Western imperialism, white Western domination. And it's also the reason why black people generally on the global stage have become the face of terms of the people who have been the most victimized of by white Western imperialism and white Western domination. All right. So that's why today I'm going to be addressing Eva Vlaardingerbroek. She is a white woman from Europe. She's part of the white right there. And I just want to show my black audience, those who are watching, but most of my content is primarily dedicated towards black people globally. Of course, if you're not black, you can watch it. There's no problem with that. But primarily to my black audience, and of course, if you're not black, you're welcome to watch. No problem with that. But I primarily dedicated this live to my black audience because I wanted black people to understand globally that, white people are in panic right now. They can see the writing on the wall, and they're especially worried about you, the black man, the black hero, because they fear the most retribution from you. Now, let me go ahead and address a chat that just came through. Davateo says, why are they apologizing? Like I said before, my opening statements, the reason why they're apologizing, especially to black people, is because white people on the global stage, okay, essentially can see the writing on the wall. They can see that their time of dominance on the global stage is coming to an end, right? And they know that out of all the people around the globe who have been undermined the most, suffer the most under white Western imperialism, white Western colonization, the people who've been undermined the most, who suffer the most under white Western imperialism and white Western domination, are actually black people. The only other group I think who's gone worse than us on the global stage, I think, are the indigenous people of the Americas, because they were genocided. But outside of them, black people globally have essentially become the face in terms of being the people who've been the most victimized. And so they fear retribution from the most, right? That's what we're going to be diving into. But all of this ties into what I'm going to be talking about today, which is Eva Vlaardingerbroek, who is a white female on the right wing in In Europe, she's been very well known for talking about replacement and white people being replaced and that. And what I'm gonna do to this, I'm gonna dive into this theory, this great person theory, and kind of debunk it and kind of better explain what's going on, especially to the white audience who may catch in the live stream or may catch in the replay. I do see a comment that was left here earlier. It's not false. We have little sash. You must be a monkey. Well, I guess he's responding to the title. Well, it is false. Like, look, white people are in decline demographically, and there's some demographic changes happen, but it's not because of this great cabal, right? Of whites who are doing it. But Eva Vlaardingerbroek essentially was at a CPAC event that was hosted in Hungary. And Eva Vlaardingerbroek, in many ways, spouted the whole great replacement theory. And the whole tenet of the great replacement theory is that, the Jews and white elites are conspiring together to essentially replace the white population across the globe. And that's what's going on, right? Now, before I even put a video, let me go ahead and just address the theory and why it's wrong, and then we'll put a dive into the video, right? Number one, there is no such thing as the great replacement theory, right? There is no great cabal of Jews or whites working together to replace the, white demographic population. That's not what's happening, okay? What's truly going on is that, one, European nations, but I would say Western nations, they have been essentially dealing with the effects of industrialization. And when a society industrializes, what you typically see is declining birth rates. And the reason is because, in an agrarian environment, people can rely on the environment, which people can rely more directly on nature, which makes them more self-sufficient. And, having children in sort of that agrarian environment is more of an economic benefit. However, once society industrializes and they go into an industrial environment, essentially, they have to rely on the infrastructure, which makes them less self-sufficient, and having children becomes a cost, which that's the reason why when societies industrialize, birth rates go down. So Western countries, after they industrialize, have been sort of seeing a slow decline. And this is only accelerated after they sort of finished the industrial cycle and sort of became, post-industrial service economies. And so many Western leaders, seeing the demographic decline, so that this cannot work because a demographic decline essentially affects both business interests and states' interests, right? When it comes to the business interests, they need a robust population because they need to have a strong consumer base and they have a strong labor force or cheap labor force that they can use to grow the economy, right? To grow the economy. And then when it comes to the state, they also need a strong demographic base because, they need a strong tax base. They need people who can go to the military, and they need people who can essentially be have a labor force in general, right? And so the declining demographics in the West essentially was a concern because it affected both, business and state interests. And so many countries in the West essentially try to deal with these issues by essentially putting in place immigration policies. Now, I know you're going to say, well, Hammer, isn't that good replacement? No. The goal of these immigration policies was not supposed to, create mass migration towards the West. The goal of these immigration policies was not meant to replace the white demographic. The goal of these immigration policies was not orchestrated by the Jews. They were simply meant to be a temporary fix in which you import a manageable amount of people to kind of help ease the effects of a declining population. You bring them to the workforce, and you sort of absorb them and integrate them into society while looking for a much more longer solution to the demographic decline. But it was never meant to be this, we're going to flood the West and replace the white European population. I can promise you right now, Joe Biden, most of these white Western leaders, what they really want is to increase the white birth rate. That's what they really want. What they really want is to be able to import white people around the world. But because white people demographics are declining, they've had to rely more on these, immigration policies, not to replace the white demographic, not to quote unquote push out the white population, but as a way to ease demographic pressures. And it's not just Western countries. If you look at Asia, for example, right, many of the countries in Asia that have had demographic declines, like Taiwan, Singapore, China, South Korea, South Korea, Japan, many of those Asian countries have also put in place similar immigration policies as a way to sort of ease the effects of the declining birth rate. Okay, let's bring these temporary workers in, and some of that's about it, right? So the question becomes, if the immigration policies that were put in the West and in many Asian countries in order to ease the effects of the declining population, if those policies were never meant to create mass migration and were never meant to replace the domestic population, then the question then becomes, why then is the West dealing with mass migration? Because obviously the goal of the policy of these immigration policies was never meant to have mass migration. That was never the goal. And most importantly, we see in Asian countries that have implemented very similar immigration policies, they don't see mass migration. So why is mass migration happening in the West if these immigration policies, the goal was not to have it happen? Why is it happening? Well, the answer is very clear. What separates the West compared to many Asian societies is that the West has to deal with its what? Western colonialism and Western imperialism. The West is dealing with the effects of its imperial history and its colonial history. Let me break it down for all the white folks in the back. Let's look at Europe, for example, right? The vast majority of the mass migration that's going towards Europe is not because of immigration policies. These are mass migrations that are coming from territories that Europeans have destabilized, primarily the Middle East. So European powers, went out there, colonized the globe, they destabilized the Middle East, destabilized Africa, staged coups in their African colonies. And so when the people in the former colonies, when the people from the territories in which they destabilized now migrate towards the West and hop on these boats, all of a sudden now it's a problem. See, it wasn't a problem when you were dropping bombs in Iraq. It wasn't a problem when you were staging coups in Africa. It wasn't a problem when you were destabilizing regions of the global South, but it's a problem when those people migrate towards you, right? Invade the world, invite the world. That's how it works. And the same thing applies to North America, right? When we look, for example, at North America, the United States immigration policy was never meant to have millions of Hispanics cross the border. That was never the policy. So why is it happening there? The same thing why it's happening in Europe, right? America is also dealing with the effects of its imperial colonial history, particularly in South America. The United States has had a long policy of essentially viewing and treating South America as its own backyard. They staged coups, they destabilized South America for generations. And so when those people from South America who experienced coups, who've been destabilized, migrate towards America, all of a sudden it's a problem. It wasn't a problem when you were staging coups in South America. It wasn't a problem when you were destabilizing South America, but it's a problem when them folks are quote unquote migrating towards your territory. So the reality is this, is that what separates the West compared to other countries that are dealing with demographic decline and that are also trying to use immigration to ease the demographic decline is that the West particularly is dealing with the effects of its imperial and colonial history. And that's what's driving the migration. That's why you're not seeing boats of people going towards South Korea, or going towards Singapore, or going towards Japan, even though many of those countries have implemented a lot of immigration policies to help ease the demographic decline. Because you know why? They don't have that history. Now, someone's going to say, well, Hammer, Japan was, in World War II was a major power. Yes, but Japan lost. Japan not only lost to the Americans, Japan essentially became a vassal state of the United States. And the entire Pacific essentially became America's backyard. Of course, now China is trying to sort of challenge that. So now that we've established that the immigration policies that were meant to ease demographic decline are not the cause behind mass migration, we can then accurately point out that what's causing the mass migration in the West is the effects and the blowback of its imperial and colonial history. That's why the Great Replacement theory is false, because it is based on this false narrative that the Jews and the white elite are colliding together to try to erase the white demographic. No, what you are dealing with, white Western people, is that industrialization is causing your demographic to decline, and the mass migration you're seeing towards the West is largely the effects and the blowback of your colonial and imperial history. With that being said, let me go ahead and play. Shout out to Jay, shout out to you, brother. In fact, let me go ahead and mod you up. Look, when it comes to Kaiser and his look, I don't know how go back there again. Who knows? But he's made it very clear that he's on the side of whiteness. So this is what it is. But now that I have shown, destroyed the girl plus theory, let's go ahead and listen to what Eva Vlaardingerbroek has to say.
Hello Hungary, hello Budapest, hello fellow Europeans and American friends. Thank you so much for having me. Allow me to skip formalities for a moment and dive right into a subject that is not so cheerful, but very, very necessary to discuss. Let me walk you through the past 7 days in Europe. This week in Stockholm, 3 elderly women in their 70s were stabbed in broad daylight on the streets. In London, 4 people were stabbed in a time span of just 42 hours. In Paris, hundreds of African migrants took to the street to riot. And in Brigalow, also in France, yet another church was burned down to the ground. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is just a few incidents in just a couple of days on our beautiful continent. But we all know that these incidents aren't incidents anymore. If there's one thing that's for sure, is that we know, and our governments also know, that there is a link between mass migration and crime. In the Dutch city of Dordrecht, something...
Now, let me go ahead and just say, right? Now, a lot of Europeans who talk about the mass migration towards right, they love talking about how, hey, when these people essentially come into the West, they engage in crime, but they're not telling the whole story. The reason why when these migrants, go into Europe, they engage in crime, because what typically happens is that those people, for the most part, are not able to really make a living from that. They end up being discriminated against by the local population. And so they go in, they migrate to these places, they settle there. Many of them are told that, oh, you can stay here, whatever. But then, what they realize is that they don't have the same economic opportunities as the local population, obviously, right? And so they engage in crime. If you essentially created policies to help to kind of create more economic opportunities, or have a much more better integration of these migrants who come towards the West, you wouldn't see the crime. Now, of course, I know what they will say. Well, we don't want them here anyway. Well, you know what? You may not want them, but it doesn't matter, because you destabilize their homelands. So as far as I'm concerned, they have every right to, quote unquote, migrate to where you are and demand to just economic opportunities. And if you want, quote unquote, assimilate them or get economic opportunities, then deal with crime. It is what it is. But you're not going to get to destabilize the homelands, stage coups, and then all of a sudden, when those people migrate towards you, you want to play dumb.
Something interesting happened the other day. They announced, and this is a small city in the Netherlands, in my home country, that a new asylum center will be put in that little town. And what did the municipality do? They said, we are going to offer citizens who live in the vicinity of this center €1,000 to take extra safety measures. Our new reality in Europe consists of frequent rapes, stabbings, killings, murders, shootings, even beheadings. But let me be clear about one thing. This did not used to happen before. This is a newly imported problem. Samuel P. Huntington predicted this over 25 years ago when he wrote, and I quote, "In the new world of mass migration, the most pervasive..."
Now, how can mass migration be imported? Because once again, when millions of people from the Middle East get on boats and show up on the shores of Italy, that's not something the white elites are importing. These people are just showing up. They're saying, hey, you destabilize our homelands, we'll go into where you are. So it's not really important. Mass migration cannot be imported for them in any just kind of way. Because once again, if it's being imported, the country will be able to kind of stop it or reverse it anytime they want to. But that's not what's happening. What's happening to the West is you are dealing with the effects of your imperialism on the global stage. And you want to point the finger to everybody but yourself. See, none of you guys are going to return the wealth you stole from those people. None of you guys are going to pull back all those military bases, but you want to complain when those folks migrate towards where you are. It's not imported. It's simply a consequence of your imperial activity.
Important and dangerous conflicts will not be between the social classes. They will not be between the rich and the poor. They will be between peoples belonging to different cultural entities. Tribal wars and ethnic conflicts will occur within civilizations. Well, boy, was he right.
I don't understand what you're trying to say. Europeans have been at war with each other forever. If you look at the map and you look at different continents, in fact, the continent which has some of the greatest conflicts on the global stage has been white Europeans. World War I, World War II. Don't get me started on all the intertribal conflicts within Europeans. What are you talking about? You actually have more conflicts than anybody else. You guys actually fight each other more than our other people do. So this idea of stop, just come out and say what you really want to say. I don't like the fact you got all these non-whites migrating and I want them to leave. And it's understandable, but I need you to understand why they're migrating to where you are and how you and your peer play a role in that situation.
And the worst part is, we as a society seem to have become indifferent to it. When another white boy or a white girl dies at the hand of an immigrant, we might shake our head, we might let out a sigh, we might even get angry for a minute or two, and then we go on with our lives. We offer the family thoughts and prayers, but nothing ever changes. Ladies and gentlemen, what does that say about us? This is a response of a society.
Now, she's actually being disingenuous. One of the most toxic political subjects, especially in Europe, is migrant crime. In fact, anytime you have a crime of a migrant or somebody who's non-white in a European context, it becomes inflamed everywhere. Everyone's talking about, oh my God. But let's be honest. In fact, the reason why the media is on top, because it's such a toxic conversation. But here's the issue I have. You're talking about how you're concerned about how all these, non-white migrants, these non-white people are causing all this crime and they're hurting their population. Fine. My question is, why don't you guys have the same energy when white settlers went to Zimbabwe and started attacking their population? Y'all would defend the white settlers in South Africa. You would defend the white settlers in Zimbabwe and how they've attacked the native population. But you want to cry when migrants go to Europe and start putting hands on white folks. That's not going to work.
That has already given up. A society that has already accepted its defeat. But is this true? Have we given up? Do we really accept the new reality that our globalist leaders have in mind for us? I know one thing for sure, and that is that if nothing changes, if we don't start to seriously fight for our continent, for our religion, for our people, our countries, then this time that we live in will go down in history as the time in which Western nations no longer had to get invaded by hostile armies in order to be conquered. This time will then go down in history as the period in which the invader was actively invited in by a corrupt.
That's not what's happening. Once again, the Western, especially in Europe, European leaders have been, their biggest problem has been trying to stop the mass migration. Look, for example, at the election of Meloni in Italy. She got elected on the ticket of stopping mass migration. What are you talking about? One of the most toxic conversations, toxic subjects in Europe has been, how do we stop the mass? Because that was never a part of the plan. The plan was never to have millions of folks lining up in the European continent. European nations keep trying. I'll give you an example. European states, especially the EU, right? They have tried to make all kinds of deals with North African states in order to block migrants from getting to the European continent. What is she talking about? They have been trying all kinds of ways, whether it's paying the domestic country to take them back, whether it's paying North African states to block the migrants. No, it's not being imported. What's happening, Eva, is that all these people are people who have been undermined by Western imperialism, Western colonization, and because they were destabilized and undermined by the West, they are migrating to where you are. That's what it is. And no, European leaders don't want this to happen because they have been desperately trying to get North African states, many other states, especially in the Middle East, to stop the migration. So it's not imported. It's actually an effect that's being forced on them that it can't stop.
Elite. And not only did this corrupt elite invite the enemy in, they made the native population.
They're not being invited in, brother. Not. The European leaders have been trying desperately to find all kinds of schemes to block the migrants. Hello, Meloni? Hello, the deals they've had with Tunisia. Come on, stop. The problem is that they've just not been able to stop it. Like, you really believe that the white elite want to? You think that European leaders really want to have millions of people line up at the borders? Is that what you believe, Eva?
Pay.
The issue is that they're dealing with the effects of their imperialism, of the colonization, and they can't stop it. Simply here in America. Once again, look at, for example, at New York City. New York City was a century, I think, city, right? But New York City has been complaining about the fact that they've had so much migrants that it's literally burning the budget. Do you think the Democrats like the fact they have all those migrants overrunning the cities? No. That was never part of the plan, Eva. The plan was never for them to be overrun by uncontrolled migration.
For it too. Everyone who has eyes can see it. The native, white, Christian European population is being replaced at an ever-accelerating rate. Let me back this up.
And this is the problem I have with that. Yes, it is true that because of your declining white birth rates and because of the unstoppable mass migration towards the West, yeah, you're probably replaced. But here's the issue. It's not some conspiracy that's happening, right? What's causing this phenomenon is industrialization that's declined the birth rates, and the effects of Western imperialism and Western colonization that's driving migrants towards the West. All of these together is what's causing, yes, you guys are replaced. But it's not some conspiracy because, once again, Western leaders have been fighting like hell to block those migrants. How many times do you see European leaders trying to pay Tunisia or countries to block the migration? Even here in America, they're literally complaining about how the migrants are overburdening the tax base. Stop. Mass migration overcrowding these states was never a part of the plan. That was never the plan. The issue is that they just not been able to stop it. But let me see what's being said in the chat. Basically, it's over for them. Yeah, it's over. And now they want people to exactly, man. They are they cause these problems. Let's go.
Up for you with some statistics from my home country. Let's take Amsterdam, the capital. Amsterdam currently consists of 56% migrants. The Hague, 58% migrants. Rotterdam, almost 60% migrants. And of course, most of these immigrants come from non-Christian, non-Western, African and Middle Eastern countries. Conclusion, the Dutch population is already outnumbered in the majority of our cities. But let's look onwards. London.
And I also want you guys to understand that because of how integrated the EU is, when migrants show up on the borders of Europe, right? Whether it's on Spain, Portugal, or Italy, once they're able to get on the European continent, because of how integrated the EU is, they can essentially move anywhere around the Europe. They can easily, once they get within Italy, Spain, they can easily move towards Europe and go wherever they want to go because of how integrated it is. So that's the reason why you'll see all these migrants who are, move towards these other cities or other countries towards Europe. It's sort of like how here in America, for example, right, when illegal immigrants from South come here, right, once they actually enter the United States, they can easily move towards the United States. They can move from state to state easily. And they can go towards Chicago. So that's what's happening over there, right? But once again, it's not something that's like this. Not something orchestrated by the Western elites. They're simply dealing with the effects of their imperial and colonial history.
54% migrants. Again, conclusion: native population outnumbered. Brussels. Color me shocked. 70% migrants. Conclusion: native population majorly outnumbered. And other Europeans will, of course, follow suit soon if they haven't already. So I'm going to draw the forbidden conclusion here. The Great Replacement theory is no longer a theory. It's reality. And what's interesting...
No, it's not reality. Here's what it needs to understand. Yes, the white demographic is being replaced. But it's not because of some cabal of Jews and white elites. It's a culmination of the effects of industrialization and the effects of their imperial and colonial history, which is driving people towards the West. And all of this together is what's causing this slow evaporation disappearance of the white demographic globally. That's why the Guerrilla theory is wrong, because the cause is wrong. Yes, the white demographic is being replaced, but it's not because of this cabal of people. It's various factors that are driving this. That's the issue. Okay? Now, I want you guys to pay attention here to what she says, right? Notice how she keeps talking about native white population. This is another thing that gets me angry about this entire conversation about her, is that white people have been the main ones terrorizing and attacking people of indigenous background globally. They went to North America, erased native population. Went to South America, erased native population. Went to Australia, erased native population. Went to New Zealand, erased native population. Went to Zimbabwe and South Africa, pushed native population, and set up white states. So my thing is, do not come to me and talk about how you care so much about the indigenous rights of white people, but you have literally have an entire history of genociding indigenous people. And not just that, of oppressing indigenous people and push them off the territory, just like what you did in Zimbabwe and South Africa. But not just that, when those indigenous people, like in Zimbabwe and South Africa, say, hey, we want to get the white settlers out, instead of you guys aligning with the indigenous population, you will actually back the white settlers. So don't come to me and talk to me about the rights of the indigenous when you literally have genocided indigenous people around the world, and you're facilitated white settlerism against indigenous people in Africa, particularly Zimbabwe and South Africa. Until this day, you still support those white settlers against the black indigenous people. So I don't want to hear it. So unless I start seeing white people going back to Europe, unless I start seeing the white settlers in Zimbabwe, in South Africa, in North America, South America, Australia, going back to Europe, I don't want to hear you talk to me about the plight of the white indigenous man. I don't want to hear it.
About replacement is that the establishment will either deny its existence, or when they admit to it, they say that it's a good thing that the native European population is soon no longer a majority.
The vast majority of European and Western leaders don't actually like what's happening. Let me be very clear. What they would like, same thing with Joe Biden, what they would like is to have a higher white birth rate. But because they've come to the realization that one, they cannot reverse the declining white birth rate, and two, they cannot stop the mass migration, they've just decided, hey, we'll just make the best of it. And a lot of times that means just pretending or say, oh, well, it's not really a problem. Trust me, deep down, they don't want it to happen. That's the reason why they're still trying to fund these countries in North Africa to block the migrants. Trust me, as much as Joe Biden talks about, how much he supports immigrants, I can promise you, what Joe Biden really wants is to reverse those white birth rates. Trust me about that. Okay? It's just that they've come to the realization that, okay, we can't reverse it, so we're going to have to make the best of it. That's what's going on
its own continent. Dutch national disgrace and dubbed climate pope Frans Timmermans already stated in 2015 that diversity is humanity's destiny and that Europe will be diverse. And of course,
once again, the promise to the vast majority of those white folks were saying that deep down they don't actually want white to be replaced, right? What they really want is to have the white to increase. It's just that because they've come to the realization that they're not going to be able to reverse the declining birth rates, and they're not going to be able to stop the mass migration, they've just decided, hey, we're going to have to accept the reality and make the best of it. That's what's happening. But go ahead.
By now, I think we all know what they mean with the word diversity. It means less white people, less of you. Imagine this in an Asian or an African country.
Actually, yes, Eva, we can imagine it. It's called Zimbabwe and South Africa. When whites came into Zimbabwe, pushed their population out, whites came into South Africa, pushed them out. But notice, it wasn't a problem when white people were pushing their population out when it came to Africa. It wasn't a problem when you were doing it in North America, South America, Australia, New Zealand. And even to this day, y'all still defend the white settlers there, and you still back them against the indigenous black population. It wasn't a problem then. But the moment in which white people in Europe start feeling like they're being pushed out, all of a sudden now you want to talk about indigenous rights. Get the fuck out of my face.
Imagine their leaders rejoicing in the fact that their people will soon no longer be a majority in their own country. Absolutely.
Western leaders are not rejoicing. They've just come to the realization that they're not going to stop what's happening due to industrialization and then the effects of the colonial and imperial history. That's all that is.
Unthinkable, unimaginable. So what in the world is wrong with our leaders? The underlying sentiment of what they say is always the same. Our establishment claims that white people are evil and that our history is somehow fundamentally different from that of others.
Yes. Now, evil may be a harsh term, but yeah. The reason people said, because once again, you literally raped and pillaged the entire. Look, here's what gets me mad about these statements, right? Is that white people want to have it both ways. On one hand, they want to brag about how they essentially raped and pillaged the world. Great. But then when you say, okay, well, what about all of the atrocities that you committed in order to rape and pillage the globe? All of a sudden, like, well, what about, other people? You cannot have it both ways. If you want to brag about how you essentially invaded the globe and took over the globe, great. you also are going to have to take into account, you're also going to have to take ownership of all of the atrocities that you had to commit in order to rape, pillage, and take over the globe. But they want to have both ways. They want to have the glory of conquering the planet, but they don't want to have to deal with the shame of all of the atrocities they committed in order for them to conquer the planet. So yes, that's the reason why we say you guys, white people are evil, and your history is fundamentally different. Don't gaslight.
Consciously or unconsciously, they have sucked up the lies and the anti-white dogmas of the neo-Marxist critical race theory.
Now, here's another thing I've heard a lot, especially on Twitter, right? Is that we've gotten to a point now where talking about white people's history is literally now being called anti-white. If I point out that, hey, the Atlantic slave trade happened, all of a sudden now, white people will say you're being anti-white. If I talk about the fact that, hey, you guys genocide Native Americans, you genocided Native people in North America, South America, Australia, New Zealand, you colonized the globe, all of a sudden, that's anti-white. That's critical race theory. That's woke. So what we have come to now is that what they're literally saying is that if you simply talk about the atrocities that white people have committed or white people had to commit in order to rape and pillage the globe, they're not equating talking about white people's atrocities to you being anti-white. That's insane.
That's why the totalitarians in Brussels are trying to force you, the Hungarian people, a sovereign nation, to accept immigrants despite the fact that the population has said no, and so has the government. But make no mistake, the majority of the Dutch people haven't asked for this either. Just like Brussels is forcing Hungary to accept these hordes of immigrants, they are doing the same now, even in the smallest of towns in the Netherlands. No part may remain Dutch in the traditional sense of the word.
Once again, the vast majority of Western leaders do not want this mass migration. Once again, they've come to the realization that one, when these people overhoard the quote unquote European continent, right? Once they get on there, they'll make their way towards these countries anyway. And number two, they realize it's going to be very difficult and impossible to actually repatriate them back to where they are. So there's no way to stop the migration from coming there, and there's really no way to send them back in this kind of way. And so they kind of have to deal with the issue. But to me, I mean, one thing, the migration. What's simply happening is that you have a combination of declining white birth rates due to industrialization and the effects of white people's imperial and colonial history, which is driving the mass migration towards the West. And all of this together is what's causing the slow demographic erasure of white people. And because they're not able to stop the mass migration, because they're not able to reverse the decline birth rates, because they're not able to send them back in this kind of way, they have to make best of the situation. But that doesn't mean that they're orchestrating or this what they want. You are simply dealing with the effects and the consequences of the system you created, which is capitalism, and the effects of your imperial and colonial history. Stop complaining.
No part of Europe may remain European. And it's not difficult to understand why. If the old Europe still exists in certain places, then people will be able to compare the new Europe to the old, and newsflash, they will prefer the old. That's why the Eurocrats hate Hungary so much. And their message is clear.
Look, let me make something very clear. I know Hungary is trying to know, because a lot of the migrants, when they step on the European continent, they'll move around, and I think Hungary's been trying to block them. Look, this is what I mean by the replacement theory thing is dumb. Even if somehow Hungary built all these walls to stop the migrants from flooding their country, guess what, Eva Vlaardingerbroek? That does not change the fact that Hungary has declining birth rate. That does not change the fact if they don't find a way to reverse those birth rates, they'll essentially go extinct. That's why the shit is dumb. Yeah, you may be able to quote unquote build these giant walls to prevent the mass migration. You may be able to find ways to pay off countries to block the mass migrants, right? In other words, trying to avoid the effects of your imperial and colonial history. But you're not going to be able to reverse the effects of a declining birth rate. That's why it doesn't work. And so to try and make it seem as if it's some cabal of the Jews and the white elite, that's insane. But notice, instead of them addressing the fact that, hey, these people are migrating towards the West because we destabilize, colonize, and destroy their territory. No, they don't want to admit that. They're just complaining that the effects of their imperial colonial history is now blown back on them. Here's what it is. Somebody in the chat said about, I don't know if it's an FBA or an ADOS, but stop that nonsense.
Our way of life, our Christian religion, our nations, they have to go without exception. Their vision of the future is the neoliberal, unrecognizable Europe, where every city becomes kind of like Brussels. Ugly, dirty, unsafe, zero social cohesion, where the buildings are constantly under construction and they never ever seem to finish, and even when they do, the end result is uglier somehow than what they started with. And what are we left with? A permanent state of isolation, confusion, and disorientation. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the New World Order.
So, because you guys are dealing with the effects of your imperial colonial history, that's the New World Order. See, this is what makes me laugh about white people, right? Same thing in America too. They really believe that they are the world. It's crazy when you think about it. Like, you'll see a story of somebody saying, "Oh, the international community condemns this country or condemns Russia," but it's really just the West. The vast majority of the globe is not condemning Russia, but it's the West. Like, they really believe that they are the world. They really believe that if something affects them, then that affects the world. But if something affects the world, it doesn't affect them. Keep believing that.
So what's the antidote? A strong Christian Europe of sovereign nation states.
A Christian white Europe is not going to change the fact that your birth rates are declining. A Christian white Europe is not going to change the fact that you will pay and deal with the effects of your imperial colonial history. And that will take the form in many ways of folks migrating to where you are because you destabilize the home territories. Get over it.
That's why we need to outright reject the lie that nationalism causes war. It's not nationalism or national sovereignty that causes war.
Within the European context, that is 100% true. Okay? One of the reasons why nationalism is so taboo in Europe is because historically, when white people become very nationalistic, they tend to be more prone to war and conflict. World War I, World War II, so it's wrong. So she's actually wrong. Within the European context, nationalism does lead to war.
It's expansionism. And where in Europe do we find that nowadays? In one place and one place only, Brussels.
Now, here's what makes me laugh about Poland and Hungary and all of these countries that love complaining about the European Union. You know what's so crazy about it? You guys love hopping on these stages talking about how bad the EU is, EU that, but none of you are going to leave the EU. When is Viktor Orban going to have Hungary leave the EU? When is Poland going to leave the EU? And the crazy part is, not only are you not going to leave the EU, you're not going to stop receiving the funds from the EU, right? see, when the EU gives you those funds, when the EU gives you all that money, you guys have no problem opening your hands and taking the money. Now, here's what's so funny about that. The European Union had three stools, three pillars: UK, Germany, and UK, Germany, and France. The UK left, so now it's just Germany and France. And in many ways, really, Germany is the economic heart of Europe, the economic heart of the European Union. They're the most industrialized country within Europe. So really, many of the countries, especially in Eastern Europe, right? You love complaining about the EU, and you love complaining about the mandates of Germany and Brussels, all that stuff. But none of you guys have a problem when the EU gives you that money, when they give you those funds, right? When they give you that protection. None of you have a problem with that. See, that's the problem I have. This is all just talk. If you really believed in this, we want to be independent, fuck the EU, why don't you leave the EU? Why are you still taking the money? And most importantly, when the EU says, okay, we'll take the money back, why are you complaining? The reality of the conversation is, look, you guys, whether it's Hungary or Poland, although you may not have colonies, you guys, your development, your industrialization, your rise as countries was fueled by the Western world. And the Western world got their power and the wealth from colonizing the globe. So in other words, the same wealth that Western countries were able to generate by raping and pillaging the world, they then used that wealth to essentially invest it in Eastern Europe and build Europe. So in other words, the quote-unquote blood money, of the white colonial West was used to build you up. So because you guys received the blood money to help you develop, you are now equally as responsible as the other Western powers in regards to European, Western imperialism and Western colonialism. So don't talk to me about the EU and Brussels, but y'all not going to leave the EU. You're still going to accept money from the EU. Stop it.
Isn't it funny how the same people who erode our national sovereignty and love to do it, give it all up to the bureaucrats there, that those people are now telling us that we need to spend billions.
Once again, you don't have a problem with it when they give you money, right? When those same EU bureaucrats give you all that money, you give them funds, it's not a problem then. Stop it.
Billions of euros on the national sovereignty of Ukraine.
Ukraine is a geopolitical proxy war between the West and the anti-Western bloc, primarily the BRICS, which is led by China. Russia is the military of the BRICS. The goal was to use Ukraine as a proxy to take out the Russians as the military of the BRICS and encircle China. So that's different. That's actually an existential war for the West, because if they lose the war in Ukraine, then that means the Western bloc is going to lose the geopolitical conflict. And if they lose the geopolitical conflict, then that means that the Western world, the Western bloc, will lose the preeminence on the global stage.
It's a joke, honestly, and it's a pretty sick, expensive, and dangerous joke. During a recent interview, I got asked by an interviewer, do you think that you ever go too far? Do you think that you're ever too radical? I thought about it for a second, and I said, no. No, I don't think I go too far. Truth be told, ladies and gentlemen, I think we in Europe do not go far enough. I think that if we really think about the organized, structural attack on our civilization, that we don't do enough. Do we do enough to stop the attack on our families, on our continent, on our countries, on our religion? When we...
Once again, nobody is attacking you. It's like, hold up, like that's what the David said, right? But exactly, you complain about the problems you cause. Once again, who created industrialization? White people are the ones that created the system of industrialization, the system of capitalism. So the system you created, industrialization, capitalism, is what caused the birth decline. And the mass migration that's going towards Europe is caused by you. Why? Because those are the places in which you rape, pillaged for generations. Those are the places in which you've undermined. You went around the world and essentially engaged in Western imperialism and Western colonization. And when those places that were colonized, right, or that became victims of Western imperialism, now those people are essentially migrating to where you are. Now it's a problem. No. If you did not invade the globe, if you didn't colonize the globe, if you didn't, engage in Western imperialism, you wouldn't have one of the mass migration going towards Europe. You're complaining about problems that you create. Stop it.
Hear about another murder, another stabbing of a young innocent child. Do we do enough? When we know that our national sovereignty has been given up in less than a century to Brussels, do we do enough? When we hear that Christian kids in Germany are now converting to Islam to fit in, do we do enough? I don't think so. The totalitarian institute of the European Union needs to come down.
Now, once again, this is the quote-unquote rhetoric I'm talking about. They all love going at the EU. They all are saying, once again, when is Hungary, when is Poland, when is all those countries that you guys view as the quote-unquote heaven of quote-unquote whiteness, when are all these countries going to stop receiving the money? In fact, whenever the EU threatens to pull funds from them, they're the main ones crying. Like, all of those Eastern European countries love to bark and pump their chests out, but then when the moment in which those funds get threatened, all of a sudden now they become real docile. Stop it. If you really believe in if you really have a problem with the EU, why aren't you leaving the EU? Why aren't you doing it? Stop all this fake chest beating.
Let me be clear, I don't believe in reforms. When the foundation of your institution is rotten, and that is the case in Brussels, you can rebuild the house on top of it all you want, but it's still going to crumble. So the only answer is the Tower of Babel needs to be destroyed.
Once again, even if you demolish the EU, that's not going to help you. Here's the crazy part, right? If you actually dismantle the EU, it actually backfire on Europeans. Once again, Europeans have been able to kind of become an economic bloc on the global stage because they realized that after World War II, their era was coming to an end. You had the rise of the Soviets and the United States. And of course, later on, you had the rise of China and America. The only way Europeans can compete on the global stage now is that they come together as one economic bloc. If you dismantle the EU, you dismantle the economic unity of Europe, it becomes easy for the major powers like Russia, China, and the US to come and just pick you apart one by one. And at that point, you actually become more vulnerable. You become more weaker. And guess what, Eva? None of that reverses the declining white birth rates. None of that stops the mass migration. Because once again, you're not going to get to destabilize the globe, invade the globe for all this time and think you're somehow not going to deal with the effects. No.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are the daughters and sons of the greatest nations on earth.
Now, once again, right? This real quick, right? They love talking about how they're the greatest civilization because they were able to essentially go out there and invade the globe. Fine. But why is it that you love claiming, you love boasting about how you invaded the globe, but then when we talk about the atrocities that you had to commit in order to invade and colonize and engage in imperialism around the globe, all of a sudden you want to cry about it. When we talk about, hey, because you invaded the globe, because you colonized the globe, because you engaged in imperial activity across the globe, now you are dealing with the blowback effects of that. All of a sudden now, y'all want to start crying. You can't have it both ways. If you're saying that you're the greatest nation in the globe because you essentially conquered the globe, fine. Then you're going to have to accept the fact because you invaded the globe, you colonized the globe, you raped and pillaged the globe, you engaged in imperial activity across the globe, then you're going to have to deal with what comes with that, which is the blowback effects of your Western imperialism and Western colonial history. Stop it.
And we need to ask ourselves, what has happened to us? Where do we come from? And more importantly, where are we going? Our elites have declared a war on us.
It's not your elites, okay? They do not want what has happened. They do not want millions of people from Iraq lining up on the borders of Italy. That's not what's happening. They simply cannot stop it. That's the issue. Industrialization is driving the white birth rates. They've not been able to reverse the white birth rate decline. And when it comes to the history, the effects of the Western imperial and colonial history is driving the migrants towards Europe, towards the Western world, towards America, and they're not able to stop it. So they have to deal. They kind of have to deal with it. And yes, you're not going to be able to stop the birth rate decline. You're not going to be able to stop the mass migration because fundamentally it is an effect of your Western imperial and colonial history. And you're not going to be able to stop the decline of Western power on the global stage, both economically and militarily. So the reality, Eva Vlaardingerbroek, the future for white people is bleak. Okay? Whiteness is over. And I mean that in the most serious sense. You're going to lose your economic power globally. You're going to lose your military power globally. Your demographic will decline. You're not going to be able to stop the mass migration. It's over for you. And not just that, a center of power, both economically and militarily, will move from the West towards the rest of the globe, in which you will have the Asian century, which is this century, where the Asia will become the center of the global economy, and then you will have the African century, which is when Africa will become the center of the global economy. And you can already see it, consider the fact that the only continent that is growing demographically right now is particularly sub-Saharan Africa. So Black people, Black African people will be the majority on the global stage by the next century. Whiteness is over. Deal with it.
And now it is time for us to put on the full armor of God, fight back, and win. Thank you so much.
You are going to
so much.
All right, guys. That's it. That is it. So I've talked about it. I've dived into it. Oh, it seems I've been here for about 1 hour. But I just had to address it because, look, it is true that white people are in decline, right? Demographically, economically, militarily. It is true that you have mass migration towards the West. It is true that all of these things together will lead to them essentially becoming non-existent. But this is not being caused by the Jews. It's not being caused by white elites. They're simply dealing with the effects of industrialization, which is causing the white birth to decline, and are dealing with the effects of their imperial and colonial history, which is causing the mass migration towards the West. And all that is happening just as the Western hegemonic influence on the global stage in decline. All that is happening just at the center of power globally, both economically and militarily, is moving from the West towards the rest of the globe. All that is happening just as we are entering the Asian century, which is this century in which Asia will become the center of the global economy. And then eventually the next century will be the African century in which Africa will become the center of the global economy. And it's all happening it's all happening while Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, is the only territory that is growing demographically, and Black sub-Saharan Africans, Black Africans, will become the majority people on the global stage by the next century. So, as far as I'm concerned, the writing is on the wall. Whiteness is over, Eva, and all the white folks who are hugging you, crying in the chat, it's over. You're not going to reverse this. It is what it is. And to answer the original, yes, brother, and that's why the future is Pan-Africanism. That's the reason why. And because the center of the global economy is going to look. The future, the next century is going to be the African century, where the center of the global economy is going to move from Asia towards Africa. And in which Black Africans would not just become the center of the global economy, but they'll become the majority of people on the planet. So the future is Pan-Africanism, but not just that, right? This is the reason why the white people so apologize, because they can see the writing on the wall. They know it's over. They know it's over. And that's, and people, yes, they may have some issues with the Asian century and China and Asia over, but that's not really what they're afraid of. What they're afraid of is the African century, because they know that out of all the people on the on the planet, the people who have been undermined the most under Western imperialism and Western colonization are Black people, specifically Black Africans. The only other group who's had it worse than us is the indigenous people in North America, Australia, and New Zealand. But outside of them, we have been the biggest victims of Western imperialism and Western colonization, and so they fear retribution from us the most, right? And by the way, guys, this is the reason why they keep talking about Zimbabwe, because from their point of view, Zimbabwe, specifically Mugabe, legitimized the fear of retribution they have, specifically when it comes to Black people, right? Here you have, black Zimbabweans putting hands on white folks saying, yeah, it's our land now. And they feel that, okay, as long as Black people on the global scene are weak, we can sort of check them, right? But if we ever enter a time where Black people amass more power than us on the global stage, we fear that they're going to, quote unquote, seek retribution on white people globally. That's what they fear. And the fact that sub-Saharan Africa, specifically Black Africans, are the only ones that are growing demographically, the fact that the next century is the African century, the fact that the next century is going to be one in which the center of the global economy is going to be in Africa, is going to be one in which Black African people are good. So in other words, they're looking at a future in which Black African people are going to be the center of the global economy and the most and the biggest population on the planet. So not only will Black African people be the center of the global economy, but they will be the majority on the planet. And they fear that once that happens, Black folks, specifically Black African people, are going to turn and essentially seek retribution on the white demographic globally. That's the reason why they can't get over Mugabe, because Mugabe legitimized that fear. Yes, they have a problem with the Asians and the Asian century, but they don't fear retribution from the Asians the way they fear from the Blacks. That's the issue. I'll go ahead and leave it at that. But before I go, does any one of you guys have any other questions or concerns you guys have for me before I go? I sort of had to hop on here and do a live stream because I had to talk about this. I had to dive into this. Okay. Vaytail said white's basically going extinct. Yeah, essentially, yeah, it's white is going. And he also said that, and so they are afraid. Yeah, they're afraid. They're afraid. Put it down. Malik G says that long live Mugabe, he was right about them. Why he wasn't one for. And you know what's so funny? The same thing is, look, it is very likely that Black South Africans are going to end up in this mess because, again, they tried to help white folks. And white South Africans have stabbed them in the back so much that even Black South Africans are like, yo, we gotta quote unquote deal with this. We gotta deal with these problems. Okay, it is what it is. It is interesting, brother. It is, and that's why I have to, because look, that clip I just played to you guys, this clip has gotten close to 50 million views on Twitter. So a lot of white people who resonate were saying, as I said, I need to make a live stream addressing this nonsense, right? Now, guys, to let you guys know, because a lot of you have been asking me where I've been. Guys, I've been here. You guys already know that I currently, right now, have been going to school to study computer science, right? My undergraduate. I am now an official graduate. So the reason why I essentially, the reason why I have not been posted because I've essentially been working to finishing my degree. So I finished my degree. I am now an official graduate. I now have I am officially an undergraduate with a bachelor's in computer science. So it's always good to as when black men succeed. I try to be an example of a black man. You go out here and get your STEM degree. Go out here and build. Times up for devil's children. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, look, that's the history. Do you have the link to the video? Brother, if you want to find the link, I don't have the last link, but go to Twitter. Literally just search up Eva Vlaardingerbroek. Let me type her name in the chat. Go to Twitter and just search up this name. Search up this name. That's it. Right? And they will essentially have it. In fact, search it up on YouTube. Search up Eva Vlaardingerbroek and just like click search for Eva Vlaardingerbroek and edit the filters to like this week, and you'll see the videos. You can also go on Twitter, put in the name, and the videos will show up. So it's everywhere right now, a lot. So just set it up, right? And that's it. I don't know if I want to open the panel. But let's see here. I'll just do this really quick. Just I always try to give the option. So I'll go ahead and open the panel here really quickly for those who want to join and sort of give their take. If in a couple of minutes no one hops on, then we'll close the stream there. I always do this every live stream because folks complain that Hammer, you don't open the panel. I try, I try to open the panel, but if folks don't hop on, then we move on, right? And it's not going to be a long time. I told you guys at the beginning that if we do go over an hour, which we are over an hour now, we'll try to keep it short and precise. We'll do that. But for those who want to hop on, if not, we'll see what happens. But to address folks in the chat here, look, at the end of the day, white folks are in panic. White people are in panic. And a lot of black people, for the most part, we talk about why is it that, white people have this just incredible fixation on black people in general, right? That's something I've heard, right? Why is that in every group around the world, the Asians that come through, the Hispanics, the Arabs, they'll have problems with them, but the moment in which a black man or a black person all of a sudden now they're all over you globally, white folks. I've said it before, right? Look, let me give you guys a perfect analogy, right? Let's say you had two people, two men, right? Men one, men two, right? The first man, I essentially go into his house. And I don't know. I go into his house and I essentially rob his stuff in his house, right? And I leave, right? But the second man, I go into his house, I kill his family, I rape his family, I burn his house, I burn his home, burn his neighborhood, kill his family members. I essentially injure him, torture him, mutilate him, and then leave. Between those two men, who am I going to be the most worried about in terms of retribution? Obviously, man, too, because I did more to that person. That's how white folks view view black people globally. They know that out of all the people on the global stage, black people globally have suffered the most under Western imperialism and Western colonization. The only other group who's had it worse than us are the indigenous people in the Americas, Australia, and New Zealand. But here's the issue: those people are gone, so they don't have to worry about that, right? But outside of them, black people are the biggest victims of Western imperialism and Western colonization, and so therefore they fear retribution from us the most on the global scale. And when they see things like Mugabe and how he was putting hands on white folks, all that does is legitimize that fear of retribution, which is the reason why in 2024 they're still talking about Mugabe. So that's where it comes from, right? So in reality, they see the writing on the wall. They see that whiteness is over. And most importantly, they see that yes, you're gonna have the you're gonna have the Asian century, which is this century with the rise of China and the Asian countries. But after the Asian century, when we get to the next century, it's going to be the African century. And that's what they really fear. Look, Dude, they can see the numbers. Sub-Saharan Africa is the only territory that is growing demographically. Okay? Black Africans are going to make up the majority of the global population by the next century. So they see, look, by the next century is going to be the African century. The center of the global economy is going to move towards Black Africa, and Black Africans are going to make up the majority of people on the globe. And once this happens, they will become the dominant group on the globe. And the fear is that once this happens, Black African people, Black people are then going to turn around and seek retribution on the white demographic globally. That's what they fear. Okay? That's what they fear. What they fear is the African century and the potential retribution from the Blacks, right? They don't really fear retribution from the Asian century. Yeah, they may fear that Asians may have more economic prowess in them, but they don't fear retribution from Asians. What they really fear is not just that, Black Africans, Black people will essentially rise to the top of the global stage, during the African century, but that you will also see retribution against the white demographic globally. That's what they fear. And to them, I would say, well, get over it. Deal with it. Because as far as I'm concerned, you can see the writing on the wall. White is over. And for you to think that you were going to go around the world, rape, pillage, colonize, engage in Western imperialism, and there was never going to see, this is what kills me. Whenever we talk about white people's history, they love talking about how, it's might makes right. That's human history. They love retroactively justifying the rape, the pillage, the Western imperialism, the Western colonization in regards to the rest of the world. But the moment in which they feel like the pendulum is swinging, is turning, the tables are turning, and that the same thing could happen to them, all of a sudden now, they want to talk about morality. All of a sudden now, the rights of the indigenous matter. Shut the fuck up. If might makes right when Europeans and the West was colonizing and raping and pillaging the globe and engaging in global imperialism, right? If might makes right when it came to you guys, then guess what? Might makes right the opposite. Might makes right if other groups of people want to rape, pillage white Europeans, invade your territories, take you over, and also engage in imperialism, against the white demographics. That's the problem I have. Don't use might makes right when it comes to your Western imperialism and Western colonization. But then when other groups want to use might makes right against you and the white demographic, all of a sudden now you want to start throwing moral arguments everywhere. That's not happening in 2024, and that's not happening moving forward. With that being said, y'all, I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. But yeah, white people can sit around the wall and they know whiteness is over. It is what it is. But with that being said, y'all, like, share, subscribe, hammer out.